Welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris, focusing on life, leadership, family, marriage, and the church. We are providing tools for our inspiration and wisdom for life. Our goal is to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. If you're new to us, we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursdays. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. Here's our host, Christopher J. Harris.
Hello, my friends. Welcome again to another episode of the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, Christopher J. Harris, and so excited being with us every single week. Today this episode is actually a special edition. You all know, if you tuned in with us before, and if you've never tuned in with us before, let me just say that this podcast focuses really on four categories: on life, leadership, family and marriage, and ministry. And I'm very focused on helping to share wise ideas in a practical way that allows for everybody's life to be better. I say every single week that when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your entire life gets better. And I believe that down to the very fiber of my being. And it's not often that I do a special episode like this, but over the past few weeks and over the past few days, everybody's social media has been blowing up. This network released a docu-series called about R. Kelly. And there's been so much discussion and so much dialogue about it till I'm connected to some cool people, y'all. Let me just put it that way. I'm connected to some cool people. And one of those persons I've got on the podcast, and just like he and I, when we get together, we chop it up, whether in person or on the phone. I figured I'd let you guys eavesdrop on just the conversation we're going to have. And I've got another friend who's going to join in with us a little bit later on in the conversation, who is a trained clinical trauma therapist, psychologist, all of that stuff in a doctoral program, master's degrees, certification, up the wall, and all of that. But we're just going to have some discussion on what we heard and what we saw from the docu-series and what we're seeing on social media and all of that. So everybody, please welcome to the Wise Idea, my brother, better known as D1. What's up, D?
I'm doing great, my man. I appreciate you for having me on here. And you know, it's another day in paradise, man.
It is, bro. Well, listen, man, let's cut to the chase. Everybody that doesn't know who you are, national recording artist, a commentator, a social entrepreneur, a critical thinker. You travel all over the country, man, inspiring young people and adults alike. And so many other things. You got a brand new album getting ready to come out. We'll talk about all of that later, because I think we want to jump in. You posted, man, on Instagram something which prompted a discussion between you and I that really, it caught my attention. It caught thousands of people's attention because it was reposted, retweeted, tagged, and all of that stuff. Tell everybody real fast what you said in that post that you put on Instagram about the R. Kelly docuseries.
Right. So after watching the entire R. Kelly docuseries, I also saw the response by everyone on social media, to where a lot of people immediately called for R. Kelly to be muted. You know, the hashtag became mute R. Kelly. And it's because people were outraged at the atrocities in which he was, partaking in terms of these young women, underage girls, having, somewhat of a sex cult, or however you want to refer to it, having, women separated from their families and not being able to be in touch with their own family members because they now live with R. Kelly. So when I saw the outrage on social media, it made me say, that is people truly, that those are consumers who are realizing their power and saying, you know what, we're upset at what this entertainer has exemplified in terms of the characteristics that he's shown as a man, as a human being. We feel like it's unethical. We feel like it's immoral. It's illegal. Therefore, we want him muted. We don't want people to bump his music anymore. We want people to silence him. We want to excommunicate him from the public limelight, from playlists on Spotify and Apple Music, from all that stuff. So I simply thought about it, and I said, where do we draw the line? And I don't think it's right to just stop with R. Kelly, because sometimes you need shock value to truly reawaken your senses. And the shock value that this docu-series provided for people really made people think, like, wait, this the guy I've been supporting for the last 20 years? Like, I can't deny that he makes great music, but I don't feel the same about supporting him. So I was like, hey, while this has all of our attention, let's just think big picture. Let's think macro now and figure out what about taking this same approach towards other people who are known wife beaters in the music industry, who are known drug dealers and people who poison our communities, and their pride, their pride allows them to actually glorify this behavior. It's not even something they're remorseful for. And I just posed the question, where do we draw the line? And, what's people's opinion? Because I can speak from the standpoint of, as a man, morally, and as a Christian, saying like, yo, there's just certain stuff I should not be supporting out here. I should not be financially supporting it. I shouldn't be supporting it by listening to it. And I can say that, but I can also acknowledge the crossroads that I often come to as a man who has developed an appetite for some of the same poison that different entertainers spew out of their mouths in terms of their music. So that's the question I pose to people, and I was like, man, we need to have this discussion right now as a culture.
So really fast, D, let me just, if I can, and have you do this, let me clarify really fast on the front end of this, just so that no one mistakes what you're saying. You are in no way endorsing his behavior.
Not at all. 100% non-endorsing.
Yeah. You like everybody else, you are grieved by it, and and you use the term poison. I mean, I think that's the best word for it. I got to tell you, and I started to put this on social media, but I think if I would have put it on social media, people may have misinterpreted it. One of the arguments that people were making online and reactions in the media and all of that was that this is nothing new. Everybody knew this the whole time. Everybody knew that this was going on with R. Kelly the whole time. And I would almost argue that not everybody knew. When I, in 99 and 2000, early 2000, et cetera, I can't say that I was totally plugged in to the music culture in that way, that I was following the nitty gritty of people's lifestyle, number one. Number two, I think we have to remember that social media has given us an awareness and a connectivity that in 99 or 2000, there was not that awareness, right? You couldn't put something up at 10 o'clock and it be viral in 30 minutes as you can now. And so I was sitting there, I was floored watching this docu-series. I was absolutely blown away that all of this had taken place, and unfortunately still taking place. So I just wanted to make sure that we had that clarity as people are listening to this.
Just like you said, I don't think many people knew the extent to which this stuff. We've all heard about the sex tape with the teenager. I think we all heard about that. That was about a decade ago. I'm not a person who watched the sex tape, so I never saw that. But outside of that, social media didn't exist a decade ago like how it does now, to where you can not only understand, people's stories, but everyone who was on that docu-series has a social media page and an account, to where now you can understand these people's daily struggles. And that's one of the factors that people didn't consider, is that there's a whole generation of people who a decade ago, they were 9 and 10 years old, and now they're 19 and 20 years old, and they didn't even grow up listening to R. Kelly's music. So for them, they're sitting here like, who is this guy that's being, that's being like thrust into the fire all of a sudden, and what's the big outrage? But not everyone understands. Some people grew up to R. Kelly's music, their whole lives, and that's why those are the people who I think are trying to defend him. But the people who are a little younger, who don't have a stake on either side, they don't have a bias because they don't have a connection to his music. They're looking at it like, this is a predator. This is a predator. Like, there's no way to defend this guy anyway. Of course, I don't want to support his music. I don't want to support anything about him. So I'm just like, yo, let's talk about this on a deeper level, because R. Kelly, for better or for worse, has started a deeper conversation that we should not run from. Like, this is a teachable moment. So R. Kelly should pay the price that he deserves to pay for all of his actions. And at the same time, I'm a former teacher. I was literally a middle school teacher. So I know what a teachable moment is. And it doesn't trivialize or diminish what's happening at that time. But it does say, hey, let's deal with what's going on now. But I'm also going to use everyone's eyes and ears that's focused on this situation and say, hey, let's talk about this in the grand scheme of our lives and our society. And that's the question I posed on social media.
Yeah, you got a captive audience is what you're talking about, and a captive audience around this topic. So let's deal with that a little bit. And let's first of all, let's say that you and I are we're men, obviously. So we're our perspective doesn't include a female right now. We are going to have a guest that's going to join in with us who is a female. So I want to acknowledge that there may be some level of privilege or blind spots that you and I both have as men, that we may not totally fully grasp some of the other language or innuendo or even culture that's been created for those who are victims or survivors around this kind of abuse and predators and all that kind of good stuff. But with that said, what are your observations about the culture? Because when your post is elevating our thinking about the culture, about what kind of system have we created that we allow social icons I think social icons is the best way to say that. People whose music we like, but as you said, they are also just as toxic and just as poisonous. So where do we draw the line? And I think let's dig into that some. Where do we draw the line, man? And how do we? Because a lot of people are going to say, well, nobody's perfect.
Right, man. This is something that I woke up literally this morning, and before I got out of bed, I had to ask myself. I was like, where do we draw the line? And I always revert back to my faith and my spirituality. And at the end of the day, if it's a person who is creating art, and if their art, for example, is something that God would not be proud of, I'm at a space in my life where I don't think God would say, hey, you threw a turkey giveaway during Thanksgiving and you gave away some bikes to kids in your hood during Easter, but the music that you put out, which far more people are tuned into and know you for, the music you put out talks about murdering people and killing your own community and living a misogynistic lifestyle and selling dope. I don't think God would approve of that. And at the end of the day, my will and all of our wills should submit to, the God that we worship and that we believe in, to what his will is. So the more that you study your faith and your beliefs, the more you're allowed to be in tune with, what God's will would be. God definitely wouldn't want negative messages put out there via art, and God wouldn't be a fan of that type of music. So I would say that's primarily hip hop that I'm talking about, because I'm in a space, I'm a rapper, so I deal with rappers all day long. I know them well, who they're good people, man. Off the microphone, they're good people, and they do various, acts of kindness that help out the community, but their music, the main thing that represents them, their main business card to society, is just all full of negativity, and they're aware of what they're doing. They're aware of that, and I can't get down with that. I think with the R. Kelly thing, it's a little different to where now you have a person who their exploits off the mic have made us question if we should support what they do on the mic. I tell you what I did this morning, Chris. I woke up and I played Happy People by R. Kelly. Laid in the bed, bro, and I played Happy People by R. Kelly. And I sat there and listened to the song, and I said, man, how do I feel about this? In the song itself, there's nothing negative that I can point to in the song. But knowing the heart of the man and the actions off the mic of the man who wrote and recorded the song, it left me like, this is where we are as a society to have to make a decision. And I feel like our off the mic exploits, they do play a role in if people want to support our music or not. I think that's perfectly fine. And that's why I'm not mad at anyone who says, yo, we need to mute R. Kelly. I'm not, like, you can't fault someone for that. No one is wrong for feeling like that. And yeah, that's where I stand.
So it's interesting, though, because I think a part, again, of what you're saying is you're trying to elevate this conversation to literally say, how do we engage in a dialogue about this that is about the culture? And when you watch the docu-series, one of the things that was so telling to me, and let me just be transparent and honest and say to those that are listening to this, so my wife was aware of the docu-series much more quicker than I was, and she watched the first segment of it, and said to me, she was out of town, and said, "Hey, you need to watch this." And, my lifestyle is such that, she'll say, you need to watch this. And depending on what headspace I'm in or what I'm working on or whether I'm traveling or whether I'm writing or creating, it may be something that I'll say to her, well, just DVR it and I'll watch it later. And when she got to the second segment, she was like, no, you probably need to watch this now. And as she's telling me this, my timeline starts blowing up. So I watched the first segment and I said, oh my goodness, what is this that we're watching? So I then said to my wife, I said, we need to get our teenage daughter. So the three of us watched this docuseries together. And when I tell you that it was some uncomfortable and hard and draining, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, like exhausting to watch that, it was overwhelming. One of the reasons why it was overwhelming, which is I think what you're speaking to, D, is this idea that the whole system and culture around these young ladies failed these young ladies. That yes, as you said earlier, R. Kelly is poisonous. He's a predator, but make no mistake, it became crystal clear to me watching this docuseries that there was other people around that knew what was going on and did nothing about
it. Facts. Because they had a financial stake in making sure that the R. Kelly brand was protected and was still allowed to be successful, or because they had an emotional connection to his music, and they chose to say, man, nobody's perfect. So, like whatever's going on in his personal life, that might be messed up, but I still like this song, or this album, provides joy to me and entertainment. And it's tough. It makes us say, where are our priorities? And I just feel like while we're alive, while we have air to breathe and we have time that God has blessed us with on this earth, we have to take a stand at some point. And we have to say, man, even if a certain part of my senses is attracted to something that this person creates, I can't allow myself to fall victim to that and that temporary pleasure that comes from that at the expense of demeaning these young women and ignoring the pain and the hurt that this predator in so many ways, has brought to life after life after life. And I just think that's what I'm on. I'm just on that tip where it's like, even if I couldn't deny it. I laid in the bed this morning and listened to Happy People on purpose because I wanted to see, do I feel different about it now? Does it make me throw up to hear the song? And it didn't. It just, I'm like, I'm a musician. Sonically, it's a good song. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to ignore that side of us that may enjoy, that instant gratification we get from a piece of art that a person can create, and look at the creator overall and say, oh no, we need to do away with this, because that statement and the lives of those young women, and that statement that we make by saying we need to mute this type of figure, this type of public figure, we can't celebrate this. I personally think that's more important at this point in life.
And so one of the reasons why we have you on, D, is because you are an artist. You're in those circles. You were a middle school teacher, so you got multiple levels there. You've seen the behind the scenes. You've been on almost every major network that exists in the United States and abroad. Your albums are all over the place. Thousands upon thousands of followers on social media. So you see this from a perspective that you're on the inside of that space of that industry. I've got another friend, Miss Devona Alleyne, who is a trained clinical therapist and deals with trauma and all those kinds of things. Devona, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm amazing. And I might have jacked some of your credentials up. You're in a doctoral program. What are you working on?
I'm in a doctoral program for counseling, education, and supervision. That's to teach therapists how to be therapists.
And a part of your specialty is what?
Well, my full title is a spiritually integrative trauma therapist.
Nice.
That's deep right there. So Ms. Devona, let's jump in because we started the conversation off today with D1, who posted on social media that let's not just isolate this situation with R. Kelly. Let's elevate the conversation to say, where do we draw the line? Do we want to just mute R. Kelly, or do we need to change our whole infrastructure because we have other artists who are singing stuff that is not productive and is poisonous, in his words, to this whole dialogue and discussion. So we need to recalibrate the whole system. I wanted to bring you in, obviously, because number one, you're female, and there may be some perspective there is some perspective as a woman and as a female that you will be able to add to this discussion that as a man, we just may not be aware of and may not be familiar with. Number two, as a trained person clinically who has seen trauma, you work with folks every day who are victims/survivors and trying to move to a place of health and healing in this space. What's your reaction to the Surviving R. Kelly docu-series, and what's your initial take on it?
Well, personally and professionally, I was overwhelmed. Like, we'd heard stories, we'd heard things. I'm not from Chicago, so I got a broader picture of how pervasive it really was in watching the docu-series. I was really concerned about the survivors, identified and unidentified, who would watch that and what their reaction would be. So I was very aware of the potential pain that the ripples of this new awareness would cause. So that was the first thing. And then personally, I was overwhelmed and angry at the culture because, yeah, there's R. Kelly, but there are unnamed R. Kellys that have been existing in our culture for decades even. And there's something about how we operate that has made R. Kelly be the R. Kelly that we now know him to be.
Yeah, that's what you just said is exactly, what prompted me to have some dialogue with D1 about his perspective as an artist. I really wrestled with, if you see that this is wrong, why allow it to happen? And, you know, D, you sort of alluded to that there's a money train here. Follow the money, if you would. Let me not mess up the money train here. Devona, is that your same perspective? Do you feel like that the complicitness of this, or the enabling of these vile behaviors was about money, or do you think it's something deeper or even more widespread?
I think money is a part of it, but more of a small part, in that people work to sustain themselves, right? And nobody wants to mess up their livelihood, especially if it's, you know, a pretty decent one, right? But the other part of it is there's a certain normalization of victimization of women and girls. And I think if it were just Aaliyah, if it was just one girl, people would go, yeah, that happens. But because there were so many, that's where the outrage comes from. I think people in that circle perpetuating the system that he maintained, I think they thought to some degree it was normal until it was so many.
Yeah. So let's the three of us, let's dialogue a little bit about this, because I've talked to each one of you individually. The three of us haven't talked yet about this. But let's talk about, Devona, what you allude to when you say the normalization of this culture and the normalization of objectifying women. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And then D1, I'd love to have you chime in, because again, you're in spaces where you see some of this happening, or you see the reaction. You know, and let me just not beat around the bush on this. In many cases, D, you have fans. I mean, you've got, dare I say, a cult following, you know, a celebrity in your own right. And so I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on, you know, what does this look like? Because we can have a hashtag outrage on this and have an ADD, a cultural ADD on this, where the next thing takes off in 2 weeks or 3 weeks and move on. When I'm trying to say, how do we shift this? How do we change the culture where what we saw in that docu-series becomes not okay in the moment, where you have like a person like a Sparkle who says, oh no, I'm willing to lose even my livelihood to make sure that somebody else's life is safe. So Devona, what's your reaction to that? And then we'll hear from you, D1.
Well, there is a power dynamic that goes on between men and women of all cultures, especially in the U.S. We can talk about other countries, but in the U.S., there is this subjugation of women where men are seen as superior and women have to answer to that in some ways. And we call that rape culture, where there's a normalization of sexualizing women's bodies. So a woman can't exist in her own body without the expectation that you will be catcalled, you will be checked out, somebody will cross your boundaries asking for your number or your time, things that you don't want to give. And if you don't respond in the way that that man might want, you may be subject to violence. We train our women and girls in this country to be prepared that something could happen to you for who you are. And because of that power dynamic where men have more power, women have less power, the willingness, like Sparkle, to give up privilege to make things equal is very important. And I think as men realize, no, there is such a thing as male privilege, being willing to stand up and say, I am going to take away the power that I have in order so that somebody else can be empowered. I think that's what shifts things.
Yeah, D, what's your thoughts there?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so you know, how do we change this culture, man? So you know, as Devona just alluded to, male privilege, women being objectified, the notion of if you just do this, then that'll stop that, or women not having a right to their own bodies, et cetera, et cetera. From a cultural standpoint, a music and influence standpoint, social icon standpoint, what's your take on that?
It's so massive. It's so huge of an issue that I'll try to encapsulate, my thoughts. On one hand, I'm more concerned with how do we stop this behavior in future in young boys that are growing up now, to where we don't have any future R. Kellys that are being bred now and that feel like this behavior is okay. I think that's one aspect of this. The other aspect is perhaps how do we stop this behavior in celebrities who have cult followings? If R. Kelly wasn't a celebrity, would he have been able to pull this stuff off? Arguably not on the same scale that he did. But I do think that we have to stop, and this is going to be tough, but as much as possible, trying to deconstruct the whole notion of celebrities being greater than your average person. That right there is tough, because I think that celebrity culture means more in the United States arguably than anywhere else in the world. Like, there are entire industries that exist just to study celebrities, hence TMZ, networks like that. I feel like the more we can deconstruct that whole myth that because the person is a celebrity, they have special privileges and special rights, that could help. And I think that with being a celebrity comes a sense of entitlement that people feel. I can certainly say that. And I think the only way you get rid of that sense of entitlement is when the celebrity, I know this. Now, what I'm about to say, I know this for a fact. Whenever a celebrity who may feel a sense of entitlement feels like, the people who really hold my career in the palm of their hands, not the record label, but the fans, they're fed up and they're willing to take a stand and not support me if they're not in agreement with how I'm being a good steward of this platform and this status that I have and this power that I have by being a successful artist. If they feel like the fans will join together and essentially mute them or excommunicate them from the limelight or the mainstream industry, that will make the next potential R. Kelly think twice. That right there will certainly make the next potential predator think twice, because a lot of artists, you'll be surprised how many artists feel like, this just comes along with the industry. This is one of the perks. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is just what we do, man. Like, we work hard, man. I made music that made millions of people dance. Like, all right, if I want any girl that I want, and if I want to make her do whatever, and I want to tape our actions and whatever, like, this is it. This is one of the perks. And I know that for a fact, because I have friends who look at my life from the outside looking in, and they say, man, you a rapper? Bet. I want to be around you. I want to come on the road with you. And I think it's because they think that I'm living what we grew up thinking the stereotypical rap lifestyle was, which is popping bottles, limousines, 5-star hotels, red carpet treatment everywhere you go, and nobody says no to you on any level, personally or professionally. And that's something that we have to let people know that the fans care enough. And that's where I jumped in the other day, and essentially my post was meant to challenge the fans and to say, this is David, the music consumer speaking. This ain't D1, the rapper speaking. David, the music consumer, is saying, do we care enough as consumers to say, nah, bro, we're not letting you get away with that type of behavior and still supporting you. And you know what? We're going to handle you, R. Kelly, for sure. We're going to handle you. But not just you. The rest of y'all, too, that's out here, because we see they got some wife beaters in this industry that we still allowing you to go platinum on your albums. And we see that we still allowing your tours to sell out. And we know what you do. And you just got nominated for the Rap Album of the Year, and all you do is glorify selling cocaine. Like, you know what? Nah, bro, we not taking that anymore. And I just posed that as a question to my fellow music consumers. Like, what's up? Are we about that life or not? And I just feel like we should be, man. That's what my heart is telling me right now.
So let me ask the both of you guys a question. Mainly as an interviewer and a host, I'm welcoming you guys into my home. So my job is not to dominate the conversation, but to facilitate it. And the question I'm about to ask, I have an opinion about it, but I'd love to hear what you all think. Because somebody listening to this may say, well, it's just music. Like, why can't I just enjoy my music without having to, like, yeah, okay, he can get locked up, or I think he needs to pay for what he's done, or, you may have somebody that believes, quote unquote, in karma, or, you reap what you sow, or what's done in the dark gonna come to the light. I mean, I keep going on and on and on and on with those phrases or that paradigm or that worldview or whatever. And there's somebody that's saying it's just music. What's both of your thoughts? Devona, what's your thoughts about that as you've seen the docu-series, you have counseled hours upon hours of survivors, you know the theory. D1, you're in the studio, you're making music, your music has gone viral. What's y'all's take on that? Is it just music? Should you separate the music from the artist? Does that question make sense?
It does. I hear people's concern or people's thought that it's just music, but it's just music made by somebody who is known for causing harm. And if we're all connected, which I believe we all are, then who are we allowing to continue to suffer while we enjoy music?
Wow. D?
Yep. I couldn't have said it any better. The music, ever since we can remember, we've been told time and time again the power that music has. I could see if we were talking about something that didn't have power, but music has the power to alter your subconscious thoughts. Music has the power to alter your behavior patterns. Music has the power to change a person's life for better or for worse. And I know it because I hear fans tell me all over the country, all over the world for that matter, yo, this song that you did, D1, it changed my life. I'm still bumping this One Man Army song to this day. So that being said, it's not just music. It's actually one of the most powerful weapons that exists on this earth. And we know how powerful it is because all the way back to the biblical days, we understand the relationship that Satan had when it came to music. Satan was a gifted musician. So we can't, David as well in the Bible, he was a gifted musician. So you got a man that was after God's own heart. That was one of the people that God loved the absolute most in life. And you got literally Satan himself, who both were proficient when it came to music. So it's not ever just music. And I think that we do have to tie in the artist's lifestyle in with the music, because now watch this. If y'all watch the documentary, they brought up something very interesting. They said, I believe songs about male artists who had like these relationships or these love affairs or this affinity for underage teenage girls have existed for a while. I didn't know about this. Elvis Presley, he either had an underage girlfriend, Priscilla, I think.
They ran down a list of like 5 or 6 people. I had no idea.
I had no idea, bro. And I thought that was just because I'm younger that I had no idea. But y'all didn't know either. So by me hearing about this, I'm like, wait. So this is something that has been happening and that people have for generations been knowing. Guess what? Elvis Presley had a team as well. And his team knew, like, man, you dating that girl Priscilla from the show the other night. Man, that girl's 16 years old. Like, but all right, we're not going to say anything. It's whatever. Like, there's a history of this same behavior. The difference is now we are in the most technologically advanced time in our world's existence, to where, yes, a docu-series can be made. Yes, these young women have social media now to vent and to come out and speak and have platforms, whereas they didn't have in the past. So because of all of this stuff, it's harder and harder to separate an artist from the art that they create. I think it's one and the same now. And it should have always been one and the same, because go back to Jesus. They would not have said, yo, Jesus, it's all good that you're doing these miracles and you just made this man be able to see again, and you healed this person from the dead and you cured this person's leprosy. But we know that, man, you out here, like, you living a messed up life when you're not in the public. Like, you out here messing over little girls and raping little girls. Like, they wouldn't have been all good with that, man. Not at all. It's like the artist and the art, you know, the person's actions as well as the human being themselves, they should always be tied in together. And just because we didn't have social media throughout the existence of the world doesn't mean anything. Look how upset Malcolm X was, man, when he found out that Elijah Muhammad was living the life that he was living. You know, look how upset Malcolm X was. That broke his heart, because he's like, although this man changed my life and did so much for me personally, look what he's doing on the side. And like, that's not cool. I can't be okay with that. So why should we be okay with it?
Yeah, y'all talking heavy today. What is, do you all believe, and I have a diverse audience that listens to my podcast, diverse in terms of geographics, in terms of politics, in terms of faith, in terms of race even. But just for a moment, from a race standpoint, how much of this conversation about R. Kelly plays into the conversation of race in the Black community, and either taboo topics that are prevalent or have been prevalent in the African American community? D1, I think you alluded to this idea that, you know, if R. Kelly wasn't who he was, would this even be news, and would he have been able to get as far? Devona, you and I were speaking earlier, and you alluded to this idea of whether or not the charges and the trials and the other things where he's had charges, if the charges had involved white women, what the result would have been, et cetera, et cetera. So what's y'all's take on that? Is how much of race plays into this?
I think the fact that it went on so long, nobody said anything, everybody knew. We know just anecdotally, but I'm sure there are figures to back it up, that Black women tend to be devalued in our society. And with the wave of feminism that people attribute to white women, that was actually started by Rosa Parks and the anti-rape movement before the civil rights movement, but that's another story. But we attribute feminism to white women. We ignore intersectional feminism, where Black women acknowledge that there is male privilege and dominance within the Black community. That's one of those taboo topics that we don't talk about.
Yeah. So true. D, you nodding your head at me, brother.
in agreement, just simply nodding in agreement. I heard Chance the Rapper comment in an interview that he's from Chicago and he's done music with R. Kelly, and that of course he heard the allegations from women in the past, but Chance admitted that perhaps when the series first started, the docu-series, perhaps because these were not white women or light-skinned women, perhaps even he didn't take these allegations as serious at first, because he said that, you know, a lot of us have an implicit bias against dark-skinned Black women, to where if they're saying, yo, I got raped, yo, I just got disrespected by this person, to where we'll be like, man, she just a gold digger, you know, she just trying to get some money or something like that. And that was powerful, because I think that is true in a lot of ways, that as a Black woman, it shocks me so often, you know, through me meeting various women and having had conversations with them, how many have had some form of sexual assault or rape or whatever the proper term is for their situation occur in their childhood. And I think it's something where I'm like, why is this not just put out there to where everyone knows about it. And
that's actually
go ahead.
That's actually one of the themes that floored me in the docu-series. Number one, even the amount of men who candidly spoke about their sexual abuse that happened in their childhood. That was one theme that I think throughout the docu-series that was just very striking to me. I think the second theme that was very striking is the lack of healthy masculinity in the docu-series, from a fathering standpoint, from a men in the community standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. I actually was very thankful as I was watching this to say, man, I'm thankful that I grew up in an environment, and that doesn't, what I'm about to say doesn't negate that there may have been tenors and tones of lack of health, emotional health or whatever in terms of male privilege in there. But at least growing up, I had men who were protectors, who had a solid faith background, who didn't put up with a lack of character or integrity. In many cases, respected women, right? And I think that the evolution of respecting women, Devona may challenge this a little bit, probably, is relative to the time period that they were in. And what I mean by that is, many of the men that I grew up around, encouraged their wives, encouraged their sisters, go to school, get degrees, empower yourself and educate yourself and, build yourself up, et cetera, et cetera. And again, that's not to negate the reality that there may have been approaches and mindsets that were just unhealthy in terms of the cultural dynamic of what we spoke about earlier. But it was very striking, the lack of dads in the film, where are the dads, and the amount of babies who, from the men's standpoint, like more particularly like the brother. I mean, so R. Kelly was sexually abused himself as a child. His brother said that, he was very striking when he said, I tested it on my brother to see how he was going to respond to determine whether I could even tell my mom, or tell an adult. And I'm sitting here like, are you serious? Like, so it's bad to be abused, but it's worse that you can't even tell anybody.
Facts. Go ahead.
All the more reason that how we respond to survivors is really, really important. Like, we believe survivors. If somebody says they've been assaulted or that a grown man has approached them, rather than blame the victim, it's really important to say, I believe you. I'm sorry that happened. You have options. All of these things that we're not taught to say to people.
Let me deal with this too, because I thought about this earlier. On the backdrop of what you just said, Devona, because we do have to, I think, change our narrative in how we respond or how we view confessions or pleas for help. I think that there is a very, very small group. When you look at this whole issue around child support and baby mama drama and all of that, there's a very small populace who takes advantage of the cry for help. So for example, a couple months ago, as a pastor, I had a gentleman, part of our church, who came, and said, man, I'm being accused of this, and this, and I'm not guilty. He had been arrested a few times. His child's mother had accused him of certain things, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, when the reports actually came out, it was all fabricated. She was fabricating it because she did not want him to move on. And I don't think she's the norm, but I also think that there are some of those situations out there that makes this whole discussion more complicated. I think we need to absolutely take every complaint serious, every confession serious. I'm simply saying that as you listen to this whole dialogue, that's one element that makes all of this complicated.
Oh yeah, and that's okay, because 911 has to take every call, and some of them are more serious than others. Some of them ain't talking about nothing, and it's just they're just calling. Like, I know I called 911 as a child just to be like, what's gonna happen when I actually call? That happens. Guess what?
So that's how y'all play games in New Orleans down there, huh?
Yeah, man. We just have fun like that. But I only did it once. That's it. But outside of that, like, think about, hey, guess what? The people who handle my booking for me, they get a ton of calls, and some of the people are looking to book D1 and fly him out here and have him perform or speak at their university, and other people are calling saying, can D1 call my daughter and wish her a happy birthday today? And, things like that. And some of it is fans that's like, is this D1? And it's like, no, this is his management, da-da-da-da. But we got to take all the calls, So I think that you're going to get some people who are trying to get over on the system and file complaints because they don't want their baby's father to move on. But you're also, in the midst of that, you're going to have some people who are 100% serious, and it's a very urgent matter when it comes to them. So I do feel like that's just part of the game. Is we got to take every situation serious, because you never know. You just never know, and we can't take shortcuts.
I agree with that 100%. I'll give a statistic to you. Less than 4% of cases of sexual assault reports, less than 4% are false. And that's actually on par with false reporting for all other crimes. So when we say, oh, well, people just make up stuff, 9 times out of 10, they're really not making it up.
Wow.
You said less than 4%.
Less than 4%.
So 96% are accurate.
Yes. And those are the ones that are being reported.
I was just about to say the thing that's striking to me about that is that's the ones that have the courage to finally say something.
Absolutely, because you see what happens when you actually do say something. You're lying, you're money grubbing, maybe you wanted it, you shouldn't have been there, you shouldn't have been drinking. All of
Ooh. Wow. I love statistics because numbers do not lie, and I love statistics because that adds clarity and confirmation to the fact that we need to take these situations seriously, because you can hear a person on social media, who makes a big deal out of like, man, my girl tried to set me up, or she just trying to get money and take me to court. And because this person has a lot of followers and a large online presence, it can seem like that's the narrative for Black men, because this one public figure came out and talked about this horror story he's going through with his baby mama. But then when those numbers come out, it's like, hey, that brother is a 3%er, because the other 97%, nah, it's not happening like that, partner. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah, both of you all have alluded to this in terms of we've got to change the entire cultural narrative around this discussion. Rape culture is what you mentioned, Devona. D1, you talked about the culture of how we embrace the music and the creativity. It was interesting. Someone posted on a comment that I put on my Facebook that if you are upset at R. Kelly, but you think it's cute when the 2-year-old twerks, you're part of the problem.
If you're upset at
I would agree with that. Because there's a certain sexualization, again, of a 2-year-old dancing. A 2-year-old is not twerking. A 2-year-old is imitating somebody or moving their behind. But we sexualize it and call it twerking, and we call it cute. And so begins the sexualization of a body that is just existing in the world.
Somebody would hear that, Devona, and say that's semantics, because dancing or twerking is pretty clear, though, isn't it?
Not to a 2-year-old.
Okay. In their mind, they're just mimicking something that they've seen, huh?
Right. So it's not sexual developmentally for a 2-year-old any more than a 5-year-old wearing a pair of leggings is showing off her body. She's just wearing pants.
Right.
And that could be true for a 16-year-old. But if you have a man who's going to victimize that 16-year-old, the culture will co-sign with that man and say, oh, she's being sexual when she's just existing in the world.
Well, let me ask this from a biology standpoint and a clinical standpoint. What is the age when you start discovering, about sexuality, or I'm attracted to the person of the opposite sex, that kind of thing? What's that age range?
Well, sexuality is a part of us all. Like babies have sexuality, kids have sexuality. The act of connecting with someone sexually, those thoughts might begin in the preteen years, where you're physically attracted to somebody, where you notice a biological reaction based on your thoughts or feelings. That can also be awakened if somebody violates that child and interferes with normal development.
Yeah, that's the other thing that was very draining to me watching this docu-series. The amount of innocence that was taken away from many people around this, just, that these children are innocent. They, even like several of the parents that were interviewed and several of the people that talked, I thought this was going to be my next big break, or I thought that this was going to be my opportunity to, do my music. And then you have somebody that takes advantage of that innocence and that purity. That really, really rubbed me the wrong way. So D1, Devona, what do we get to the solutions? What's the solution? What are the solutions? And I think the two of you all are approaching this from two different angles, because D1, you are approaching this from a social and music and creativity and an influence standpoint. Devona, you are a wife, a mom, and a clinician, and you're saying with all of these hats, here's, I think, where the solutions need to lie. And you're a minister. I don't think we brought that into the discussion as well. You're a minister who has seen some of the best about the church and some of the worst about the church. So you're bringing all of those perspectives in it as well. So for both of you guys, and D1, I'll let you go first. What do you think some of the solutions to all of this is? I mean, other than the start of holding our artists accountable, what else? What else do we do, man?
Yeah, I think that having this dialogue that I try to bring to the forefront of my social media is important right now, because we have to confront thoughts that in this moment, because we do so many things just coasting through life, not realizing that I felt like I was just bumping a song that I like, but I didn't realize that, okay, technically I'm indirectly showing support for not only this artist, but everything that comes along with this artist, including their behavior off the microphone, including any of their ways that are obviously problematic to a whole bunch of young ladies' lives. That's something that we have to think more about, is the power that we have as individuals. I believe in the power of one. So a person doesn't have to say, well, yeah, the only thing I'm going to do is sit here and blast, any celebrity that I see that gets in trouble. It's like, no, you can play a role in being part of the solution. And as a consumer, you have an opportunity to take a stand and support what you think needs more love, and not to support what you think needs less love. I think that's one thing to do. I'm just really big on the power of the consumer and the power of one when we're talking about public figures. I also think that when it comes to young Black women, I think that we have to move forward and really examine our own bias that exists, and say, like, yo, these are women just like anyone else. Why is it that they're last in line when it comes to, us giving them the time of day to respect their perspective or understand their experiences or their pain and truly hear them out? It shouldn't take a docu-series to have to put some respect, on these young Black women's name. And I think having those conversations are important. So for me, being a public figure, I feel compelled to lead a lot of those conversations. And trust me, I'd rather be talking about my new album that's coming out right now, like totally. But this is part of what comes along with the territory is, hey, leaders have to lead, at all times, even when it's not the popular, convenient thing to do. So that's it. And we all have a flock that we were called to lead. So for me, it may be my fan base and my social media audience. But for the person that only has 194 followers on Instagram, guess what? That same person might have kids in their own household, and they need to do like you and your wife did, Pastor Chris, and say, yo, this is healthy dialogue to have in our household because this is my flock that I was called to lead. Or they may have patients, or they may have students at a school they teach at. We all have a flock, man, and it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 1 million, but we should be leaders who actually embrace, the responsibility that comes along with that.
I think that's powerful. Devona, before you jump in, I would just add, I think one of the other things that you said earlier, I wrote it down. We didn't get a chance to totally get back into it and dig into it. But you alluded to this idea that, we can continue to have these conversations with our girls, and we need to, the girls groups and mentoring and all of that. But you alluded to this, D1, that we also need to be having conversation with our boys. And what does that look like in terms of mentoring them and training them and having candid and healthy dialogue about what that looks like as well. So I just want to highlight that we didn't get a chance to get back to that, but you mentioned that earlier.
Yep.
Mr. Devona?
Yeah, D, I think we're on the same page about having the conversations as far as the church is concerned. I believe we need to name the elephants in the room. And yeah, there's R. Kelly, but there are things that cause women to be subjugated in the church that we call that normal, and we don't realize it. That is the beginning of rape culture, and we need to call out ourselves and say, hey, wait a minute, where are we creating this power dynamic that then maybe the world perpetuates, leading all the way up to rape? So we got to have those difficult conversations within the walls of the church and through the lens of scripture. We talk about David and Bathsheba, but there was a power dynamic there. David was king. Bathsheba, maybe she had a choice, maybe she didn't, but maybe she wasn't able to give consent. And we need to talk about that very candidly in the church to begin to change the culture.
Wow.
Yeah, I've often talked about the story of David and Bathsheba from the perspective that, David absolutely was the culprit and, was the perpetrator in this. I think for me, at least, Devona, I've got new language that helps me to frame that conversation even more. So this is where we are, y'all. We got a lot to deal with. We got a lot to work through. For anybody that's listening to this, again, I felt it was important as a dad, as a husband, as a pastor, as a leader, as an influencer, to simply raise the dialogue, to raise the conversation. It's on everybody's mind. I shouldn't say everybody, but it's on a lot of people's minds. And we've got some work that we've got to do in this regard. If you're listening to this and you've not yet seen the docu-series, I'm not sure that there is a section or component of our culture or our community where you're not impacted or could not be impacted by this. So we're going to land this plane by saying, go watch the docu-series. Let's take some of these steps and solutions that we've mentioned today, activate them within your sphere of influence and your sphere of accountability. And let's address the elephants in the room. Let's not run from it. And let's keep the victims, the survivors in our prayers. And let's not be accomplices to future victims or survivors in the process. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Our announcer is going to come and give you some more information. You know how I end every single broadcast. Live wisely.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. We hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did and would like additional resources and information, you can find the previous episodes show notes, featured guest information, and more at www.thewise-idea-podcast.com. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media. The Wise Idea Podcast is on Twitter and Facebook. Find us at The Wise Idea and at our Facebook group, The Wise Idea Podcast. On Instagram, find us at The Wise Idea Podcast. Our host is also on social media. You can find him regularly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, all located at CJ Harris 1. Finally, if you enjoyed what you've heard, head over to iTunes and/or Google Play and leave a rating and review for other listeners to find us. Our podcast is also on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you the next time. Live wisely.
Understanding. I say, what's the missing principal thing?